So, welcome from my side. My theme has been formulated by the organizers, so I had to think hard how I could meet the expectations of the organizers. And I thought this very general and important question might be best answered first with an analogy. Let's take soccer cup final, and you have a lot of things which are important. But if you look at the list of these things, there is still something missing. And it clearly is two competing teams to play the game and eventually win the trophy, and to get all the attention of the people who are waiting for it. And this is the role political parties have in elections, so they have to perform. And in that way we can understand elections not as people on some day going to the voting booth and making their cross on a piece of ballot paper, but as a complex process with some supply provided by political parties, by individual leaders, and by the many candidates who want to get elected. There is also some demand, at least enough to go voting, and there must be some connection between the two. And of course politicians speak to people directly. They use social media nowadays, and they use media to broadcast and to put in advertisements, but most is transmitted by newspapers and broadcasting stations in their own right. And this is a challenge for researchers. So we not only want to know what voters think, we also want to know what is the input of political parties, and we also want to know what arrives at the voters. So this is the connection between the supply side of elections and the demand side, and mass media play an important role in that process. Then, of course, one can start making things more complicated. What is a campaign? And there are different conceptions of campaign. If you look at the US, you would think, oh, we are in a permanent campaign, which then has perhaps some heated end period. You can also think of the long campaign, which is basically the second half of the legislative period, when you avoid doing things which are unpleasant, are the classic definition of the campaign period. If you look at what political scientists and other social scientists have done, you can distinguish the campaign focus. Is it record-directed or future program-directed? One would aim at retrospective voting, the other at prospective voting. There are lots of studies on campaigning in itself. Is it positive, focusing on the own strength and ideas, or negative, criticizing the political adversaries? Pippa Norris has distinguished the campaign style as modern, pre-modern, modern, post-modern. Such a thing can be party-centered or candidate-centered. Candidates, again, can be the ones, the leaders, or the many candidates. That has, of course, something to do with the campaign being centralized or decentralized. And the campaign can be mobilizing, more inward directing, getting out the core voters, or outward directives aiming at voters who might vote for different parties. And we can also look at the campaign dynamics, where political parties can have a master plan initially and follow that through, or they can adapt by shifting to their adversaries, shifting to changing voter demands, adapting to issues which come up in the campaign, or change the framing of their issues, and major campaign events. And although I'm not from one of the major countries, we also study elections, and I happen to be involved in that. And this is what we study in terms of the study of the supply side. So basically we try to do a full coverage. And let me spend a few seconds. I mean, the election was 2 months ago, almost on the day, and the political parties have spent many millions and have employed dozens of people and prepared for a long time. So we are way back in analyzing that, but still we have some preliminary results which might be interesting. So the parties have blessed us with the longest manifestos in their history. They have also been pretty good at daily communicating their ideas to the press. And here I have taken issues which are vaguely related to the crisis, so all the socio-economic issues. Without the yardstick, of course, it's hard to say whether these percentages are high or low, but they do not strike me as particularly high. So not everything was focused on the crisis. You can look at newspaper advertisements, and again, you see that there were quite a few, and again, the socio-economic issues see some striking differences between the parties. And what I want to do in the final few minutes of my presentation is to look again at the party, and the message which I want to say that first is important what you study. You remember the long things of different party communications, and if you look, for instance, at party press releases of what parties try to transmit to journalists, that is quite different from what they try to get at the voters directly by putting in newspaper advertisements. So in the first graph, in the upper graph, this is party press releases. So that what is here called Institutionenreform basically could be translated into corruption. The next is economy, then is infrastructure, which basically was a local issue in Vienna, and welfare policies. And this is what they try to sell to the media, and when they address the people directly in their advertisements, it's welfare policy, immigration, economy, and Europe. So there's some difference. Let's look at two issues. One is economy. Again, it's a complex, as I said before, it's a complex process. So what do the parties send out? What do the newspaper reports, and what is important to the voters? And you see the Social Democrats are the party most interested in pushing ahead the unemployment issue. Black is Catholic, is the People's Party, Conservatives, and blue is the Freedom Party, our famous populist party. The mass media focus follows suit, but it has a more neck-to-neck race between the two major parties. And what the voters do, they clearly say this is a social democratic issue. If you look at the issue of corruption, it's the Freedom Party which is most engaged in pushing the issue. Social Democrats you would not see here. If you look at the mass media, it mainly focuses on the government parties, which of course are responsible in a way, but not only, and the voters simply connect the Greens as the clean party fighting corruption. So these are things we are doing. We have just begun. If you happen to read German, there will be a book. There will also be many articles. Sylvia Kritzinger is over there. She will give a much more detailed presentation, and we are also publishing our data piece by piece. So thank you for your attention, and I think it was in my time.